PaleoRunner podcast is devoted to finding better ways to live, run, train, and eat. I'm your host, Aaron Olson. You can find more information by going to PaleoRunner.org. If you enjoy the show, please go to iTunes and leave a review. Search for PaleoRunner in iTunes and click ratings and reviews. You can also follow me on Facebook.com/RunPaleo or on Twitter @RunPaleo. I wanted to take a minute to let you know about a product I've been using called 3Fuel. 3Fuel is a sports drink that gives you fat, protein, and carbohydrates to use as a fuel source. Unlike sugary sports drinks, 3Fuel gets absorbed slowly into your bloodstream to give you sustained energy throughout your workout. If you'd like to give it a try, you can get 10% off by using the coupon code 3FOLSON. Go to PaleoRunner.org and click 3Fuel at the top of the page. If you're listening through the podcast app on iPhone, click the link displayed on the app right now. My guest today is Luke Ashton. Luke is an ultra-marathoner who recently finished a 100-miler in 18 hours on a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet. Luke, it's great to have you on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you today, Luke. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you actually got into ultra running.
Well, I've always run for fitness, probably started about 8 years ago with the gym, and then I started to build up the distance in 2009, and then was training for my first marathon in 2010. And I did marathons for a few years, and it was just the last year, so 2012 last year, where I picked up the distance and I got a feel for the longer distances. I started with 40 mile as my first ultra, and then progressed to 50. I did a few 50s, and then this year in March I did my first 100, and then I've just completed another. So it's just slowly progressed, and I've just become quite a natural love of long distance running.
Mm-hmm. What is it about some of those longer distances that you enjoy? I mean, a lot of people would think, isn't 26 miles enough? I mean, what do you get from going beyond 26 miles?
Well, to start with, 26 was enough, and for most people it is. But I think something inside was like I love the endurance side of it, and I left it a year before I took on another marathon. But the training went so much better. I started to tap into my nutrition, and start to feel a lot better with my fitness. So the year from then on was a progression, really. So from the 26 onwards, it was like, well, what's a couple more miles to 30 in training, and I did it in training, felt good, and I thought I'm actually really enjoying the feeling of the endorphins, the scenery that I see, because I do a lot of off-road, and then the natural sort of high feeling of just pushing your body that much further. And it just feels great for me. I mean, I embrace the pain, and you go through some low moments and then some highs, but you always vision the finish and the end and how you feel once you've completed, these long races.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I've really noticed about the longer races is that there's a certain high that you get from doing some of these longer training runs and races that you don't get from the shorter stuff. It's really interesting how that happened after, as I was training for my first marathon, I really started to enjoy that as well.
Yeah, it's hard to explain unless you explain to another runner with the similar background maybe. But you get the slight feeling with the marathon, but with marathon runners it's kind of, you get to the point where you feel like you're breaking and then you just want it to end and you push so hard to the finish. Whereas I find with the ultra distance, you can step back that little bit. You can just absorb your environment, the run, the terrain, everything, the nature around you, and it's just you just feel it a lot more because it's a slightly slower pace, and you've got the day to do it, depending on the actual distance, and I find the feeling and the endorphins, they come in slightly later, but they last so much longer, and they also last after the race as well.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you started running about 8 years ago. What was it that initially got you kind of interested in it?
Well, because I was a quite, it was in my sort of mid-20s that I really started to get fit. I was never very fit when I was younger, and at school I went the other direction, maybe in the wrong groups and such. And I just used to go out and party and just have too much fun drinking and stuff. And it was in my mid-20s I started to really listen to my body, thinking I can't do this anymore. I just need to, do other stuff and get fit. So the gym come first, and then I would use a cross trainer or the treadmill just as a means of fitness at the end of my weight sessions. And then the running outside came later, and it wasn't until I started to do more and experience the outside that I started to prefer it to, indoors. And then it just progressed slowly over the coming years. But the racing that started later, that wasn't until 2010, a couple of half marathons, a few marathons, and then it wasn't till last year, the beginning of last year, I started to race every month. And I got a little bit too keen, I think, and then a few injuries sort of came here and there, but I managed to get through them and really start to listen to my body, and that's when the nutrition just slowly started to change and got better.
Okay. So, Luke, you're actually over in London. And you said you like to get outdoors on the trails a lot. What are the trails like over there?
Well, I'm the south coast, so I'm a little distance from London. I'm by the coast in Brighton, in Sussex. So we're only about 3.5, 4 miles from the nearest sort of hilly trails. It's a place in South Downs, and it runs all across the south of the UK, the southeast. So you can go anywhere from, you could just go out and do a 15 mile, or you could go out and do 30 or a 25-mile distance. It's your choice. There's so much out down this way. So yeah, training for me can be varied. I can do the road, on and off road as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you also mentioned that you started to switch up your nutrition a little bit. Tell me about what you've been doing lately with the higher fat, lower carb diet.
Yeah, I kind of tapped into the bulletproof coffees back in March this year, and I was eating sort of less carbohydrates and less grains in particular, and I started to I did try the fruitarian for a very brief period, although I found I suffered with stomach issues. I knew that wasn't going to be for me, so it was in sort of August this year that I started to follow the no sugar and no grain approach, which is obviously higher fat and it's quite low carbohydrate. So my carbohydrates come from mainly vegetables and just small amounts of fruit. If I do eat fruit, I always combine it with a fat source, so that could be cream or cheese, creme fraiche, or some kind of oil. And yeah, it's really took off quite well. The transition period was a little testing because I used to eat quite a lot of fruit. So I think with the lack of the GI sugar in my body, I went through a process where I had a few headaches and started to feel quite lethargic. And I was thinking, oh gosh, is this actually the right thing to do? Is it going to pass? And with help from a group online on Facebook, people just said, you've got to ride through it. It's just because of the sugars that you're not consuming now. And soon enough, within about a week, I felt so much better, and my energy level just went so much higher through the roof, really. And in regards to running, I just felt a lot more sort of stable with my energy level. Just to keep going rather than getting a dip that I would get if I had any kind of fruit sugar or the gels, energy gels.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when you said you're cutting out a lot of the grains and you're cutting back on fruits, are carbohydrates something that you specifically measure throughout your day, or are you just kind of eyeballing it?
I've always gone on how I feel for hunger, so I always listen to my hunger, especially with the racing as well. But I don't measure anything or measure the amounts, but I know it's quite low, the actual amounts. But I won't deprive myself of certain fruits. If I have a taste for something, I will have it. But if I know it's high in the sugar, then I would just have less the amount. And because I'm having less, I find it sweeter now, so I don't need so much as I would normally for the taste satisfaction. So I still have fruit in my diet. It might only be one portion a day, but then some days I might have, 3 small portions in a day. But I try not to have it when I first wake. That wouldn't normally happen. It would come later in the day. And I always find it helps as well before a gym session, just to have some kind of fruit with some fats, just to give you that little bit extra energy, especially if you're lifting weights.
Okay, interesting. I heard you on an interview with Vinny Tortorich, and you had told him that one of the reasons you went to this style of diet is because you were having some stomach issues. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I sort of went from, if you look at the past year, from summer last year, I went to vegetarian, quite strict vegetarian, and then I went into sort of a vegan lifestyle. I only sort of kind of managed for about 3 months. I found that I was really missing something, and I could see body changes, especially getting really lean, maybe too lean. My muscle mass was not as noticeable as it was before, and just a regular diet, and I was a bit unsure how health-wise it was going to do me, any good. So I reintroduced fish in the diet. I had sort of a back to vegetarian, and then I'd eat occasional fish, oily fish. And then it was the beginning of this year that I started to read more about the no sugars and the no grain way of eating. So from the summer, August this year, is when it really took off, and I've been quite strict following it ever since. And it's really helped within regards to the endurance in the racing.
So what did you hear about some of the benefits that you were going to see? And you said you notice you're running, you have a lot more energy throughout the day. Are there any other benefits that have come along with this diet?
Yeah, I feel I'm a lot more focused than before, because the way I was eating before with more high fruit in my diet, and I used to eat a lot of dried fruit when I went out running, thinking that was the better fuel source. So I'd have nuts with like dried fruit, maybe apricots and dates, and not really realizing that they're actually quite high in GI sugar. So I think what swayed my decision was I did a race in Florida, the Keys 50-mile race, and I really suffered, not only because of the humidity heat that I'm not used to, because in the UK we get very wet, not so hot weather, but it was a consumption of too much fruit sugar, and it gave me really bad stomach distress, cramping, bloating, and I just actually went completely off the food altogether, and I was just craving, just salty water, and the salt capsules, and that's what got me through to the finish. But I really thought, well, actually, maybe I need to really cut back. And I heard Vinny on Rich Roll's podcast, and I thought this is quite interesting, and then I tapped into it, and I thought he's not only fun and entertaining to listen to, he's very, very informative with the information provided. And then I thought, I'm going to give this a shot. So it started back in August, and I haven't really looked back, because I find my hunger levels are a lot less frequent, whereas before, every 2 hours to 3 hours, I'd have to have food on me. Like, I work long hours as well, so I had to make sure I had enough food supplies with me that I could eat that was healthy, rather than having to go look for something and maybe just have that bit of chocolate or something. So whereas now I find that I can go maybe 4, sometimes 5 hours, and I'm not even hungry, so I just listen to my hunger and just eat when needed.
Yeah, that seems to be a constant theme that I hear on this show with a lot of the guests, is that when they switch over to a diet that has a little bit more fat, they're not as hungry throughout the day, and that's something that I found as well, and that's just kind of a really nice feeling. I used to have to pack snacks with me all the time and things like that. I would just always be hungry, but my hunger has gone down, and it sounds like you've had that same thing happen to you.
Yeah, and when I first started, I was still eating because I was looking at the clock, or I'd think, oh, it's been 3 hours, I must have my snack. So I'd end up eating something, and then I'd have a few bites, and I'm like, why am I eating this? I'm not actually even hungry for this. I don't actually want it, and I was sort of eating probably too much, because I was trying to adapt as well to include the fats and not go hungry in the worry that I may go hungry. But then within a few more weeks, it passed, and it's like, well, actually, I don't really need that snack. I can go longer periods, and the same happens with the running performance. As long as I've had something an hour to 2 hours previous, when I go out running, I can go 2 to 3 hours before I actually need to have any type of fuel. Which is just a completely new way of running for me, and it's just helped tremendously, especially with being an ultra runner.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about what you eat on a typical day, and then maybe we could go into what kind of foods you ate on that last 100 miler.
Sure. Okay. I vary. I very much vary the diet. It sort of switches each day, but I always like to include lots of vegetables, as well as the fats as a base to the diet. For instance, I mean, today I'd had like fried kale, and I used goose fat to fry the kale. We've got obviously Christmas coming up, and over here we have turkey or goose for Christmas, rather than like you guys have for Thanksgiving. So we can use goose fat. So I've used that to fry off the kale and some seasoning, and then I had a side of zucchini and some cauliflower rice. I know some people would think, oh, for breakfast that just sounds pretty yuck, but it's what I have a taste for. So I'm got quite used to this way of eating. So I had that today, and then I had that with coffee with cream. And then after my run today, I had an omelette, and I would use more yolk than the actual whites. Some seasoning, and I had that with some bacon, a few bits of cheese in there, and then spinach. And that's all for today. But I'd alternate bulletproof coffee either with the coconut oil or MCT oil, and that's with grass-fed butter. And I like to do that when working because my day starts at 4 a.m. So I tend to have that on waking. I'm not always too hungry for it, so I take it in a flask with me in the car, and I just have that on the drive to work. And then I'm normally good for like 4 to 5 hours if I have one of those. And then the next snack really, just to sort of like graze on something, would probably be some berries with some cream or creme fraiche. I really like the raw cacao that you get. It's like the raw chocolate. I'd sprinkle some of that in and some spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, just to give it a bit more flavour. Then that would keep me going till lunch, sort of late afternoon, and that would normally be either a fish with some salad, lots of olive oil, boiled eggs maybe in there, olives in there, or I may do some chickpeas in a stew with roasted vegetables, and I'd finish with some cheese on the side. It really does vary. I've got back into eating meat again, but just in small amounts. It's not every day. But I found with the no sugar, no grain, although I have fish, oily fish, it just meant that something was missing still, and I had a taste for the meat again. So I still have that in small amounts, just not every day. So dinner may be some kind of meat with salads or vegetables, and I do like my olive oil. I always have stuff in olive oil, and normally finish with some sort of cheese. If I'm going to have fruit, I can have that with cheese or cream. It just varies each day. As long as the plate looks bright, colourful, I can cook it. It's just experiment. It's been quite a journey.
Mm-hmm. So you said your day typically starts at 4 a.m. What do you do for a living?
I'm a security officer at the airport up here. It's about 25 miles from where I live, at Gatwick. So I do shift work, and we work 12-hour shifts. So if I'm leaving for work, I'm up at 4. So I tend to have something substantial, just because I'm not sure when my next break will be. It depends on the operation. So it could be another 5 to 6 hours before I actually get a breakfast break. So I tend to just take what I need with me. But I found since I've changed, I'm packing a lot less food supplies than I would usually. Usually my bag would be weighed down with snacks and dinner because I was worried I'd just get so hungry. Whereas now it's like, well, if I've just got some fruit and cream and then dinner's just a salad, I know I've got a small box of nuts or seeds mix that will just see me through, because it's very rare that I'm that hungry I need it. It's just the hunger levels are few and far between on this way of eating.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your training. It's you started out saying that you've dealt with some injuries and you started listening to your body more. Tell me about your training and kind of how you fit that in with your 12-hour shift work.
It's a juggle. It really is. It's not easy. I won't do any gym sessions when I'm on shift on 12-hour days. But I'd come home and do a very short run in the evening, just down the seafront. So that would just be a minimum of 2 miles, maybe up to 4 or 5 maximum. And I normally try to get to bed an early night after I've had something to eat. So on work days, it's only very short runs. And I used to run every day. I was doing a run streak that ended in the summer because I had a ligament ankle injury. So I now sort of save the running to every other day, or I skip 2 days and do cross training instead. So gym would be on rest days, and it's normally 2 to 3 times a week. Strengthening core work. I do the stepper and the cross trainer. And I like to go out on the bike as well. Depends on the weather though, because we're on the coast. We get high winds sometimes and quite harsh rain, so it's not practical time of year to go out on a race bike. But that would happen more in the better weather. And the longer runs, they will happen on my days off, depending on the week and what races are coming up.
So, a lot of people thinking about a 100-miler might be thinking, well, this guy must be running every day and putting in tons of miles, but it sounds like you're running about every other day and kind of fitting it in around your schedule and doing some cross training. So how does that work? I mean, how many miles a week are you actually running?
Well, up to the race, I didn't quite get to my key target as much as the first attempt, but I managed to get to about 73 miles maximum in the week, and that was 3 weeks out before the race, and then I scaled back, and the week before was a complete taper. It was just about, I think I did 3 miles, that was it, before the race. So I would do back-to-back long runs on days off, so that may be a 20-25. I won't go over 35 in training. I find that it's just, I'm not sure if it's what I've read that it's a good choice, or I just worry that it's pushing myself that bit too far. I know I could go further, but it's also the time it takes as well, because obviously it's time on feet. You're looking at 5.5, 6 hours, maybe even longer to reach that distance. So I look at how many hours I've spent in the week. So up to a 100-mile distance race, I try to get to. The next one I do, I'd like to get to about 85 miles in the week. But I'd make sure that 2 of those are back-to-back running days, next to each other.
And do you include speed training?
I did too back in spring this year, sort of because I had a couple of road marathons. But with the ultra races coming in between marathons, it was really hard to do both, and you just can't physically do both. It's either go out long in a zone 2 training and get your endurance and stamina and time on feet, or you concentrate on the speed and then the distance maybe becomes less. So at the moment it's been more of the longer range distances, and then if I feel strong enough, then I'll do a couple of intervals, some tempo runs, and a little bit of speed training, but nothing like as a marathon training schedule. I'm going to save that for sort of spring or late winter next year, because I've had quite a lot of races. So it really just vary the schedule otherwise. I just can't myself do both, and I think that's probably what maybe aggravated my injuries doing the combination of two. It wasn't good for me, so I'm really listening more to the body now. I've got the nutrition right and it works for me, so the speed training can come later in the winter.
Mm-hmm. And Luke, you've actually in the past year, I think you've done something like 12 ultra marathons. Is that right?
Yeah, if you're looking back to July last summer, so 2012 was my first ever ultra. So since then to now, I've done 12 ultra marathons, and the end of the month I have my 20th marathon that started back in 2010. So yeah, quite a lot of racing. I'm gonna take it back a little now and just concentrate on my longer distances, because that's really where my heart is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what are you shooting for in that marathon that you have coming up?
We'll see. I mean, if I'm fit, I feel pretty much halfway recovered. I mean, I did my longest 8 miles since the race today, and come the marathon on the 22nd of this month, that will be just over 3 weeks since the ultra. So it really just depends how my legs feel. I mean, I'm very conditioned and I recover quickly. It's quite amazing how quickly I recovered from this race compared to the last one, the last 100 miles. I think within about 5 days, my legs started to feel pretty much back to normal. I just felt like I'd done a very heavy leg session down the gym, and so incorporated more stretching. And I really think, the extra vegetables and the nutrient dense foods that I'm now eating and the higher fat has really helped, especially with my joints as well. I feel that it's come in tune better to my conditioning and full recovery. So we'll see how I feel. If I'm really feeling it and I want to race, I might push a bit, but I'm not going to really push flat out, because it's just not worth the actual risk of getting any injuries if my body's not fully 100% recovered.
Right. And we talked a little bit about what you eat on a daily basis, but how about during that 100 miler? What did you eat, and then what are you going to eat during this upcoming marathon?
Well, typical any race, I make sure I have the fat coffee, like the bulletproof. So it's the butter, the coconut oil, and then the organic ground coffee. So I'd mix that up, have that first thing, usually an avocado, and maybe a wheatgrass shot of some sort, and I dilute coconut water down with water so it's not too much GI sugar, and just sip on that until the race start. And then I'm normally good for about a good 2.5 to 3 hours before I have any fuel. So it would be seed mix, sort of pumpkin, pine nuts, sunflower seeds, or nuts. Macadamias are really good for me, and Brazil nuts, pecans. I normally bring olives with me, and I have a bottle of olive oil as well. I just sip that as I go. Cheese is quite good. What else? That's pretty much it. And I like my chai seeds as well. I tend to make a little mixture of that with added salt, and espresso, and some coconut oil, and just shake it up. And I normally have that after I've done about 30 miles or so, just as a little kick. And then I make sure I try and drink coffee with cream. That's normally from my crew, because you won't get cream at any checkpoints. So it really helps to have a crew with supplies for those little bits that you can't get from the aid tents.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're taking olive oil. You're taking chia seeds. Now, how do you do the chia seeds? Is it in a flask or what?
I have sort of various little very small size bottles that I use. They're about 100 ml container bottle. I would soak the chia seeds in some coconut water, and then I'd probably add some raw chocolate, the raw cacao powder in there, and then I'd pour an espresso over, and then dilute with some more water. And then either MCT oil or the coconut oil. I'd only use coconut oil in the summer months, the warmer months, because in the cold it's going to go glumpy and solid. So it would be an MCT oil in the winter months. Just shake that up, and that would just be with my crew, so I could just gulp that down when needed.
So, during the race, it sounds like you really listen to your body as far as what you feel like you need to eat. Is there any
Yeah.
point where you feel like, okay, I need some fruit now, or I need some starchy carbohydrates? How are you feeling during that?
I used to back sort of probably in the springtime, I used to sort of rely on, some sort of carbohydrates, thinking the dried fruit was my good source of carbohydrates, which, it's not a bad thing, but I can't consume that much of it because of the fruit sugar content. So back then I was just having, a trickle of that here and there, but it was just still too much. So now I would just stick to the real fruit. So that could be some orange wedges, watermelon. I will save banana probably until very much in the later stages of the race because that's a really quick sugar for me, and I'm not used to the banana anymore, so I'd have that much later in the race. And just small amounts. I mean, I find that my body is responding very well with just a little bit of sugar from the fruit, and I don't have any form of carbohydrate at all. And come to think of it, the actual 100 I didn't have any except the fruit. So it worked for me, and I did try some dark chocolate at the very, very end of the race. I only had about sort of 5 miles left to go, and by then, your legs are done. In my head, I've finished already, so I really don't think it gave me that lift. Although it tasted good, it just, I don't think it really gave me any boost. I was just ready to finish by then. But I find I don't get any crash because I'm not having the actual, frequent sugar or carbohydrates to spike my glycogen. So my energy levels are quite constant, and I just make sure as soon as you feel that slight hunger, just have a little something, and you keeps the body firing, and you just keep the energy level stable throughout the whole race.
And at the beginning, you mentioned that when you were on the vegetarian or vegan style diet, you were getting a little bit too skinny. What has your weight been like on the no sugar, no grains type diet?
It has improved because I don't tend to weigh myself. I don't have any scale, so you can tend to feel when you've put pounds on or lost any, and I can tell by the mirror. So I feel like my muscle mass is slightly more fuller on this way of eating, and although I'm still very lean, I'm not as skinny as I was, and I can tell very much in the face. I'm not as gaunt looking as I was when I went vegan. I just looked too skinny, especially in my arms as well, because I still do the weights, and it was like I wasn't really, gaining anywhere. Although I'm an ultra runner, I'm very lean anyway. It's very hard for me to pack on the mass, and I don't want to pack on too much because it will make me heavier. So I can afford to add a little bit for a race, but then usually once I've done especially a long 100-miler, after that weekend, those extra pounds, they've just come straight off anyway. But I've found that I have added, actually, to be honest, a few extra pounds eating this way. But because the way I'm eating is I can go longer periods without, I think that's then the main reason why it's, added slightly extra. Some days I may have too much fat in the diet, and I think, okay, that feels like it was a bit too much maybe. So the next day, it would be more of a fasting day where I wouldn't eat so much, and I just always eat to whenever I feel hungry.
Okay. And have you gotten into the minimal running shoes? What kind of shoes are you wearing during the 100 milers?
I can't because of the injuries and that. A few years back, I had a knee injury, and I was actually completely had to stop running altogether. So I got so frustrated on what ways to sort of heal and just not run at all. I got quite depressed not running, so I looked at other ways of conditioning and retraining, and I went to the minimal approach, and I just kicked off the shoes, and I started the barefoot running, and I just had to do very low distance, so I was just running minutes rather than mileage on grass till I was adapted, and that was a very long process. That took about a good 6 to 9 months till I was actually fully there. So I can only really run barefoot about 8 miles maximum, so I have a very neutral shoe. I can still run in shoes now, which I do, and I did for the 100. I ran in sort of a trail shoe, but it's a zero drop neutral shoe, and I tend to like to have a little bit of extra protection, especially for these longer distances, because with a barefoot shoe shoe, it will you're going to feel every rock, every tree stump, and on road as well. Even if you've gone over 50 miles, your feet are going to feel everything, and it's just going to be really sensitive. So you want to have that little bit more protection. So I always tend to use the shoes for these really long distances. But in the warmer months, I'm known to wear these running sandals, the Lunar. And I really love them because you don't get any black toenails, you don't get any blisters, and they feel great. And it's a sort of a freedom of the running. Your feet feel very free. And with those, they have quite a good added protection as well. They're not as barefoot as people may think. Then they're not like the Vibram, 5 fingers. They're very low profile, and there's hardly any protection on those. And I've got plenty of those, but I can't go long distance in them. They'd just be for the fun of shorter distances.
Right. So you found that the sandals, I think are they the Luna sandals?
Yeah, Lunar sandals, yeah.
They have enough protection for some of those long distances?
Yeah, I mean, the longest I've run in one pair of those was Hadrian's Wall, which was 70 miles, and I'd managed that distance in those. So that's the longest I've ever run in a sandal. But with those, there's various styles they have, and some have better sort of trail grip than others. The standard Leadville model is very much a road dry weather sandal. So the grip on the other models, there's I think the Mono and the Ono, they're more of a trail sandal. But the ones I have aren't quite so good in wet, and we get a lot of wet here, so the shoes will come back on for something like that. But now it's got very cold, so I'm back in trail shoes. They're just a very neutral, low profile.
Gotcha. And Luke, you've got some great photos on your Instagram feed, and
yeah.
I'm wondering, do you take those with your iPhone when you're running, or what kind of camera are you using?
Yeah, it's all the iPhone 5. I don't go anywhere without it, and it has my run keeper on as well, so people can track me on a race with the help of a backup battery. But yeah, when I'm out running, I'm always taking pictures of something because I see some quite good landscapes and sights, especially sunsets. So yeah, I'm always snapping away on the iPhone. I'm probably going to get one of those added lenses. Sony do this lens that clips on to the camera, and it improves the actual pixel and quality, and it has a zoom feature as well. So I shall be probably using one of those shortly to sort of enhance my pictures, because I've got quite a knack with taking my pictures now.
And what do you do to keep your iPhone free from sweat and all that?
Well, it's with the sort of the liner jackets I wear, it's okay in the actual pockets because they're lined, and it tends to be okay. When it's going to get really cold, though, I have one of those waterproof pouches that I put around my neck, and it just sits under the jacket in one of those, and that seems to do the trick. But at the moment it's not quite cold enough just for that, so I'm making do with just the pockets of the jacket. Seems to be fine.
Gotcha. Well, Luke, it's been great talking with you. Do you have any final tips for someone who wants to give this a try, as far as changing their diet or even trying the minimal shoes?
Just experiment with regards to the nutrition and the diet. I always find anyone who asks me, because I tend not to tell people about it unless they ask. A lot of people will find out or know anyway, especially work colleagues. I say just make 1 or 2 changes to start with. Never do the whole, go down the whole road, because you'll never stick to it or follow it unless you're very in tune with your nutrition already. So I find anyone new to it should just take small steps with maybe remove the sugar first, and then try taking out the grain, and just be experimenting with different recipes and vegetables. There's a lot you can do with vegetables, making like cauliflower rice, zucchini bakes. There's some amazing sites on the internet, with recipes to be creative. Just get creative. And then regards to shoes and minimal, if you're used to a higher profile trainer, it's always best to maybe gradually go slightly less with the drop rather than completely barefoot shoe, because the dramatic change would probably cause some type of distress or injury, especially on the ankles or somewhere on the sort of footbed if you're not adapted to it. So you have to really tread carefully and start very slow, very low mileage to begin with, and maybe progress in a more neutral shoe to start with, and keep the old shoes for your longer runs until you've transitioned slowly and just built it up more gradually, and then eventually you could just use the neutral shoes once you've adapted over to them.
Gotcha. And Luke, where can people go to find out more about you? I'd really like it if you let everyone know your Instagram feed, because those are just some great pictures that you've got on there.
Sure. Yeah, it's Ashton378 on Instagram and Twitter. And it's got my blog page on there as well, the link as well, so people can read my race reports and nutrition page on there as well.
Great. Ashton378, both on Twitter and Instagram, people. It's been great talking with you, Luke. Thanks so much for being part of the show.
Yeah, and keep it up. It's a great show. I've just started listening, and yeah, keep up the good work. And thanks for calling.
You've been listening to another PaleoRunner podcast. If you like podcasts, you're also going to like Audible.com. Audible has over 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Kindle, Android, or MP3 player. If you'd like to get a free audiobook download, go to audibletrial.com/PaleoRunner or click on the link displayed on the app right now. Thanks for listening.